last year when he came to visit our campus in person. He's the president of PhysicianLoans. That's a mortgage company that for over 20 years has been specializing in serving doctors. He's been in the business for 23 years, and he was the first in the industry to market a special mortgage just for doctors and to develop an entire team and company around that concept. He provides many learning opportunities about home buying for doctors through free webinars, articles for the AMA, and workshops in medical schools like ours in hospitals across the country. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Tal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, normally I would be there on campus this time of year. I'm typically traveling, and I give this talk on campuses at about 40 medical schools across the country. This year, well, Delta's not getting my business. I'm based in Atlanta. So happy to be able to do this virtually, and you guys will be happy to know you can say Vanderbilt is #1. This is kicking off the season for me. This is my first talk that I'm doing for the medical schools, and I'll be at it for the next couple months. But this is the kickoff, so appreciate the opportunity. So what I want to do is share, just don't want to spend a lot of time talking about myself, but just so you know a little bit more about who we are. Heather told you a little bit, but this is, I want to give you a little bit more of the kind of personal background. So, and I like starting with this picture on the right. So that's me in front many years ago. And I'm sitting in front of one of my younger brothers, and this is his match day. He is a physician. To our left are our parents, and I like starting with this picture because it kind of tells a story about who we are, how we got here. My parents are the ones who started a mortgage company back in 1993, and when they started it, it was a generic mortgage company doing some of the generic kinds of loans that you'll be learning a little bit about here. What we soon learned, having a brother in medical school and for them a son in medical school, man, they needed a lot of financial advice and help and handholding, especially when it came time to graduate and buy a home going into residency. So this is where we kind of locked into this group and realized there's a real need here to help this group and help this community. So it grew from that. It's now 20 years plus and going strong. And so we've become a preferred provider through associations such as AMA, AOA. We do a lot of these educational seminars. So that's what we've evolved to. And happy to be here and help out, answer any questions you have. One other just piece of more formal business before we get started is I always like to make sure that I share this disclosure that there is no financial tie between our organization and Vanderbilt. I was invited to give this workshop as a benefit and for your information and to help with your financial literacy. And Heather, as you mentioned at the start, these are things that you don't really learn in medical school. So hopefully here as a trusted advisor to be able to answer any questions you have. So to go along with why am I here, so I picture this as you guys, right? You guys are, you're the smart ones, you're Vanderbilt Medical School, right? You're the owl, you can learn medicine, you're at the top of your game. So that's the medicine you, right? Now, what happens when we get to the mortgage you? I'm sure some of you can relate with this picture. You have a completely different feeling. And yeah, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and it's just amazing how the discussion usually starts very similar. Like, I feel so stupid because I don't even know where to begin. All right, well, you don't have to feel that way. you know how to tackle medicine. You can read a book, learn what you need. With mortgages, it's a little bit different. And quite honestly, a lot of what's out there is marketing and hype, as opposed to, marketing hype and very biased information, as opposed to really the information that you need. So, I have a very good idea of the kinds of questions that will be asked. And again, I do know not everybody in the audience here tonight are the medical school students. So a lot of what we talked about will be geared, some of the nuances, towards the graduating med students, but also a lot of what we discuss will be very beneficial because it's kind of generic budgeting and home buying information. So, we'll be covering topics such as, number one question that I receive is, how do I know if I should even buy? I mean, we know you need a roof over your head. Do you rent or do you try to buy? And how do you know how to even make that decision? And then, of course, how much do you qualify for, and what to do and when? And I do want to point out that this is a live session. It's not a recording. And for tonight, so for you guys tonight, this is open to Q&A. So on your dashboards there, you have the ability to type in questions, and I'll be scanning those. You're also welcome to unmute yourselves and ask a question if you'd like. Hopefully it's not just a one-way discussion. Like I said, I can feed all the information that I think is important, but I want you guys to walk away with your questions answered so that you feel you can move forward with the process and making the right decision. So with that, whoops, wrong button. So with that, the number one question that I receive, I mentioned, is the buy versus rent. How do you decide? And this is a visual representation of what I've been talking about for many years. This is my first year of actually putting it together like this, but there are three things that have to come together, and it's how much you qualify for, and all of you will qualify roughly within the same price range as a graduating medical school student. We know the rough ballpark of what your salary is going to be as a first-year resident, PGY1. So we know how much you're going to qualify for. That has to match up with what you feel comfortable with in your budget. You may have some additional expenses, some additional financial burdens that maybe aren't reflected in how much you qualify for. You'll see what I mean by that shortly. So that has to overlap along with the local home prices. So if you are matching into a city where all three of these things do converge someplace, at least that's understanding step number one, that you're a candidate for buying a home. Because if these three circles don't match, then you're not even going to be a candidate. You're not going to be able to buy. So question number two is, how much do you qualify for? And the most graduating medical school students will buy a home in the $125,000 to $330,000 range. It'll give you payments of about $850 to $1,800. Now, of course, depending on where you move, that will really determine the kind of house you get. As I mentioned, I'm here in Atlanta, so if anyone's matching at Emory, what you get for $300,000 somewhere in the vicinity of Emory, which, by the way, isn't a house, it's going to be a condo, very different from those of you who match. Our company, we're based out of Columbus, Ohio. So let's say if you end up matching in Toledo, what you get for $300,000 in Toledo is very different. So you're going to keep that in mind as well. And then if you are a dual income family, so if you are buying a home with someone else, by the way, it doesn't have to be married. but they have to be, that house has to be their primary residence, and you're both going to be earning an income. You can use their income as well. They don't also have to be a doctor for the special kind of financing we're going to be talking about. But then you're able to purchase, in the 450, 500,000 and up range. So we're going to see how those numbers look in a little bit. So to take a look at this another way, in the buy versus rent, really it comes down to four factors. There's the match city, which we talked about. There is the timeline. How long do you plan to stay in this property? Your lifestyle, and then the financial benefits. So if we look specifically about cities, anybody here hoping to go to Houston? So as I show you on this chart, Houston is one of the, from a real estate standpoint, one of the best places to head to. This is something I found not long ago in Bloomberg Business Week. So I apologize if it didn't come out, it wasn't a digital image to begin with. But if you notice on this chart, where if you're on the x-axis going along to the right, that is your cost, expenses for living, and then going up, you're on the Y, you're going to have how much you are earning. So obviously, if you move to some place like New York, California, you're going to earn more. Now, as a resident, again, you're only talking about a few $1,000s difference. Unfortunately, it can be a lot different when once you're out of training, once you're out of residency. But the housing values will be very, very different. So this is the kind of image that you're going to keep in mind, so that as you start thinking about it right now, you're going to be able to get a sense for, based on where you're hoping to end up, if buying a house is even going to be feasible or not. So match city is really the #1 factor. Then you've got your timeline. Now, I want to make sure that I make something very clear here. I'm here to share information. I'm here to show you how to make the decision of buy versus rent. I am not here to talk any of you into buying a house, or to tell you that you have to buy a house or that you should buy a house. I am a fan of real estate over the long term. It's a great investment, but you're not buying it as an investment right now if you're buying it going into residency. And so that's important to keep in mind when we're talking about timeline. When it comes to timeline, the longer you're in a home, the more it makes sense to buy versus rent. And if we take a look at residency timeframes, if you're going into a 3-year residency, it may or may not make sense to buy, and that's going to be very city specific. If you're going into a 4 or a 5-year residency, it becomes more, let's say, more interesting to look at the numbers for buying. And then certainly if you plan to stick around an extra year or two with fellowship after that, or even have a plan to stay in that city. So there is a website that I recommend, fhfa.gov. And when you get the handouts, this will be included in the handouts for those of you that aren't able to take notes right now. And if you go to that website and you scroll down a little bit on the homepage, there's something called the Housing Price Index Report. And it's a report that comes out quarterly. And I apologize on this one. This goes through 2018. I was having problems loading a recent image of this, but the trend continued where home values are going up. And you can clearly see on this graph, even if the screen is too small to see the dates along the bottom, where 2008 hit. You're all familiar with the recession that we had after the real estate crash in 2008. And you can see what happened to real estate. And then you can see over the next several years how that ended up correcting itself, and then even exceeding where it was at the peak just before the crash. So long term, you're going to mean real estate, no, you'll be fine. What about those residents who bought a home in 2008 and then had to sell in 2012 or 13? So the good news is about being a doctor is that once they finished residency, they had the financial strength and capability given their next position, where most of them just, if they were going to be underwater, meaning if they were going to owe more on the house than the loan amount than what it was worth, then they hung on to it as a rental property, hung on to it for a few years and sold it. I'm happy to say that we didn't have anybody during that period that defaulted, that foreclosed on their house because of that, what happened in the market. So again, there are risks, certainly, and you're going to keep that in mind, but at least as a physician, you're really able to minimize those risks. Lifestyle. I don't have a slide for that. It's just very simple. It's, are you ready for any of the maintenance or work that's involved with owning a home or not? If you're not ready for it yet, that's fine. Keep renting. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to split the difference, maybe look at a condo where the association takes care of all the outside yard work, the maintenance outside, and all you're responsible for is indoors. So that's part of a discussion that you would have with the real estate agent. Then there is the financial benefits. And again, here, what I want to say is that it's important from a financial literacy standpoint to understand the concept and the financial benefits, but I'm going into this not telling you you have to buy a home for the financial benefits. You're going to buy a home because it suits your needs, because it makes sense for you, because you would rather buy rather than continue renting. But it's not like buying right now, going into residency is going to be your get-rich-quick scheme. In fact, when you retire has no correlation to whether you bought a home as a resident or not. So I want everybody to feel comfortable with whatever decision you make. I discuss buy versus rent so that I help you make that decision. What I really hate and what bothers me is that after the fact, I'll talk to young doctors and they say, you know what, I didn't know I could buy, or I wished I could buy, or I thought I had no choice but to rent. So if you want to buy, you can. I'm helping you get to that decision. But here's when people talk about the financial benefits of owning, what it is that they're referring to. And what I'm doing here is I'm comparing renting a place for $1,300 a month. And again, wherever you match, these numbers aren't going to be exactly the same, but you'll get the concept here. So we're going to look at renting for $1,300 a month over 4 years. So you will have spent $62,000 roughly over that 4-year period. And we're going to compare that to buying a place for $275,000 that you're going to hold for 4 years. And if we do that, then you have here PITI, what's called your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And I'm going to go through this in detail with you shortly so you understand all of what goes into a mortgage payment. But you've got your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance of $1,553 a month. That's all in. And notice that's more than what you're paying for rent. But when you do buy, there are 2 benefits to home ownership. One second here, guys. There we go. So there's called something building equity in your property. That means every month when you make a mortgage payment, you are paying down part of the balance of your loan. So you bought this house for $275,000. We lent you the full $275,000 in this example. But after 4 years of making payments, your balance is now $21,000 less. So let's say you just sold the house at the end of 4 years for $275,000. You would walk away with $21,000 because you don't get that full 275. First, the loan has to be paid off, the mortgage is paid off, and the remainder goes to you. Then there's also something called appreciation, which is the increase in value of the home. And you saw that in the chart just a couple slides ago. Right now, you know, it's been a crazy run over the last couple of years. And even despite the pandemic, which is very interesting, homes over the last year, the national average is they increased about 6.5 to 7.5%. That's the national average. Let's assume a more moderate 3.5% appreciation. What that means is 4 years after buying your home, it's worth $36,000 more. So you're able to sell it for more than what you bought it for, which is unlike a car, right? You buy a car, and whenever you do sell it down the line, you're going to get less for it. It's not appreciating in value. So with these benefits of home ownership, your savings comes out to $44,000 in buying over renting. However, this is the gross figure. There are two things that chip away at this, and I'm wondering, let's see, anybody want to unmute themselves if you have any ideas, or type in what you think chips away at the savings? Good. So Andy said maintenance costs. Excellent. I'm sorry, Paulitha, also maintenance. Okay, very good. So definitely maintenance. Now, a couple of you mentioned things like taxes and interest on the loan. So that's, interestingly, that's already included in your PITI. So if we're going to look at the two things that really make the difference here, your maintenance, and this is just a national kind of an industry average, just assume 1% per year. If you buy a newer home or a condo, it's going to be less than that. If you're buying an old home, maybe a little bit more. So you're going to want to take that into consideration. But that obviously over the years, and then the big one is the selling cost. And that's typically going to be 6% of the sales price of your home. So now when you take this into consideration, in this particular example, any example you create is going to be different, but in this particular example, if you bought versus rented over this 4-year period, yes, you would have come out ahead $16,000. I'm not saying it's nothing, but is that world changing? Is that going to really impact your lifestyle? Is that going to impact how quickly you retire? No, not on a 4-year window. But I like going through this so that you understand what it means when people talk about the benefits of home ownership. And here's another reason why. So I do talk about companies when I do this. Not everyone is a good apple, so I do bring up examples of bad apples. However, I will cross out the names. You can see here on the bottom right, I blacked out the company name on this. But these are sales tactics that I really don't like. Here's a company. There's a pretty large national company, and notice what they're trying to do is convince you to buy a home. That's their job as a salesperson, not as an advisor to help you get through the process and help you run the analysis of what would it cost and budgeting, things like that. So notice this, my job is to educate them on how quickly they can build wealth in real estate and to relieve their stress. Well, that doesn't apply to you as a graduating medical school student. And notice this faulty math that they use as well. In their example, they're showing you buy a home for $400,000. Once you consider your down payment, it means you actually invested $20,000 in this. And the way they're portraying this is over the first year, if it appreciated 6.5%, and they're using that because this is a recent marketing piece that went out by this company. And as I said, national average was 6.5% over the last year. What they're telling you is, hey, your house just increased in value by $26,000. So you just had an ROI, or return on investment, of 130%. That's wrong. First of all, it's only after 1 year. If you buy a home, you're going to be in it for more than 1 year, and it doesn't take into consideration those other pieces we just talked about, such as maintenance, such as the selling costs when you sell it. So it's, call it faulty marketing, faulty advertising. It really bothers me that you have a lot of that out there in the industry, but you'll see me pointing that out throughout this talk so that really you don't feel like you are a deer in the headlights when you see it. So again, getting back to the buy versus rent, the key for you, all those numbers aside, is simply to make sure that these three pieces all match up. How much you qualify for, how much you're comfortable with, and the local home prices. So let's take a look at how much you would qualify for, because what I showed you was the dollar amount of home, but let's take a look at that on an individual basis, and the term that's used is debt ratio. What is your debt ratio? And that's going to determine how much you qualify for. The debt ratio, it's a ratio of your total monthly debt divided by your monthly gross income. So a physician loan makes it easier to qualify. We allow a 50% debt ratio. Different kinds of loans, and we're going to go through what those are, they allow lower debt ratios. And the reason for this is you definitely want as low of a debt ratio as possible. However, the reality on the ground is, as a graduating med student, you have a lot of debt. You're not earning the full physician pay yet. So a lot of you are going to have high debt ratios at that stage, whether you're buying or renting. So a physician loan makes it easier to qualify. And this is one of the first steps that a loan officer is going to do. So to get started with the process, you're going to reach out to a loan officer. I'll go through that as well, but you can go to our website and request a loan officer to help you through these equations. And nobody you should never be charged for this. We certainly don't. Any company you work with should not charge for this. And one of the first steps the loan officer is going to do is review your debt ratio with you. They're going to need some information from you. And what they're going to do is look at this equation, look at your debt in the numerator, look at your expected salary as a resident, and then what they're going to do is solve for that housing number. Now, again, I know not everybody in the audience is a medical school student, so you're not going to residency, but this same principle applies to you. Doesn't matter what kind of loan you're getting, doesn't matter what your income's going to be. This debt ratio equation is the same across the board. So a loan officer will solve for this housing to see how large that number can be. So again, let's say you're applying for a loan that allows a 50% debt ratio. You know that number, that gets plugged in on the left-hand side of this equation. You know your salary, that's on the denominator. You know all your different debt pieces. So we're now solving how big can that housing monthly payment be, and this equation still be true. That's what we're doing here. And then what your loan officer does is take that number and tell you how much of a loan you qualify for. So let's assume your monthly gross income this coming year with your next job will be $4,833. So that is meaning pre-tax, we're not taking out taxes. And your loan allows for a 50% debt ratio. So if we plug in those two numbers, what I know is that your total monthly debt can go up to, but not exceed, $2,417. And that means if you have a car loan, if you're making payments on student loans, if you have credit card debt, if you have zero debt, your housing payment can go up to $2,400. Now, some of you might be thinking that's a crazy monthly payment for me as a first-year resident, and that's true. It is, which is why we go back to that first my slide with the Venn diagram, where what you qualify for has to overlap somewhere with what you feel comfortable paying. And then, of course, you overlay onto that what the housing prices are in that area. So here's a little preview of what's to come, because when you calculate this, we have to take into consideration the million-dollar question of how are your student loans accounted for? Because you may not be aware of this yet, but as a graduating medical school student, I'm not quite certain how this works for the other disciplines there, but as a graduating medical school student, you do not have proof of what your monthly payments are going to be. And even if their payments will be zero at the time you graduate, and for your 6-month grace period afterwards, you know how much you've borrowed, but you don't get any proof from the student loan servicer of what your payments are. So that's why when we'll be talking shortly about a physician loan and how that allows you to get around that, because a traditional loan is going to require proof from your student loan servicer as to what your monthly payments are. So here's an example, and I'm proud of myself for coming up with this term, a faux physician loan, as opposed to a physician loan. But here's an example of an actual email I received, and notice this person was saying that they were working with somebody. I X'd out the bank information, but they said it was a physician loan, but they will only exclude student loans if they can show that it's been deferred for the next 12 months, which is not something that is possible. Your student loans are going to be on whatever payment plan you choose for a 12-month period, but you're not going to be able to show it for 12 months from the date when you close, because you're not going to hit that cycle at that time. So this is an example of why this is going to be an important question to bring up. We'll be coming back to that shortly. Getting back to the monthly payments, I showed you on a prior slide what monthly payments are on a home, and it includes not just the principal and interest on what you borrowed, but your taxes and insurance as well. The taxes is the real estate taxes, the property taxes, and insurance is your homeowner's insurance. And then for those of you buying a condo, you're going to have your condo association dues as well. So to show you a breakdown of what this looks like, let's assume a $275,000 purchase price, and you do a physician loan with no money down. The rate here that I'm plugging in is a placeholder, 3.75. Again, it's going to vary a little bit based on where you are, the time of year, your particulars. So I don't want anyone thinking, oh, Tal said the current rates are 3.75. Actually, the rates are probably going to be a little bit better than that. But again, I'm using this as a placeholder. So your P&I, your principal and interest on your loan will be sorry, 1 second, guys. There we go. Somehow my own web screen was covering that. So it will be $1,273 a month. And then taxes, that obviously will vary depending on what you're buying and where in the country. So in my case, in this example, $230 a month, and insurance, which is your homeowner's insurance. So in this example, you're buying a home for $275, and now it's going to cost you about $1,550 a month if you purchased it, and if you purchased it with no money down. Now that you have this number, and you're going to go through this number with the loan officer for your particular situation, now you can also start to decide, well, how does this compare to renting? What does it cost to rent in the area? There are some markets where it costs less to rent. There's on a monthly basis. There are some markets where it's more. So now with this information, you'll be able to start comparing the two. And then you can talk to a loan officer and go through any number of scenarios here. So you can run, let's say you're moving to, again, one of those more affordable places like well, I was going to say Toledo, but anywhere in Ohio, and $150,000 purchase price, you'll be under $1,000 a month on your mortgage. So whatever purchase price, whatever price point you're looking at, a good loan officer will be able to work through that with you. All right, so I've talked about the monthly payments. Let's take a look at the kinds of loans that are out there. And people find this very helpful because really, ignore all the hype, ignore a lot of marketing information. There are 4 kinds of loans out there. So there is something called a physician loan. I've been mentioning that, but what exactly is that? It's a special mortgage. It's what's called a portfolio loan. Not every company has a true physician loan. There are many companies that market what they call a physician loan, but it's not, and that's what I bill as the physician loan. I'll show you the details of what makes a true physician loan in a minute here. Let's say you're not a doctor, and this is especially true for those of you in the audience that are in the other disciplines. Most of you, if you have good credit, you will apply for something called a conforming loan. That's kind of the generic mortgage in the U.S. for those with good credit. One way to look at it is it's called conforming because you conform to the guidelines established by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The typical graduating med student does not conform to those guidelines. Then there's something called an FHA loan, which is a loan for those with either not as good credit or some sort of issues with their file where they're not as strong of a borrower as a conforming loan. And then there's a VA loan, Veterans Administration loan. And as the name implies, that's for eligible military. So these are the only kinds of loans that really you would come across. Now, your challenge as a consumer is that a company can market a loan by any name they want. That, as heavily regulated as this industry is, that is not. So a company can call something a physician loan, but under the hood, it might be a conforming loan or an FHA loan. So what is it that really makes a physician loan, and why is it so important to apply for the right kind of loan? For those of you that are not graduating medical school students, you'll still want to bring up these points because you'll want to make sure that there are not going to be issues in your approval. So yes, it's a given that typically a graduating professional student, you're going to have little to no savings, and you'll have student loan debt. So those top 2 bullet points, that's kind of a given across the board. But a true physician loan does not require proof from your student loan servicer of what your payments will be for the next 12 months. And what we do is we simply estimate your IBR payments, called your income-based repayment. I'm sure Heather will have a session or 2 on those for you guys shortly on the repayment strategies. So as I mentioned, because you won't have proof, that's key. Also, as a graduating medical school student, you don't have an employment contract or pay stubs. Now, you have a match letter, and some of you, if you participate in any early match, you might actually have that match letter, but that's not an employment contract. That's a letter that states, congratulations, you've been accepted to our program. Here's your salary, here's your start date, right? But that's not a legal contract. And what's interesting is that most residency programs don't actually sign an employment contract until late in the summer. after the point when you would have needed it if you're going to be buying a house. So any occupation that you're in, any degree, always ask the loan officer what kind of proof you're going to need regarding my employment in order to be able to close on the loan. And then things like medical license, again, traditional financing. Oh, you say you're a doctor? Great. I need your state medical license as proof. Well, as you're transitioning as a graduating med student, you're not going to have that in time if you're trying to buy this summer. Now, if you're waiting for a year, if you're going to rent for a year and then buy down the line, no problem. By the way, that's another question that comes up. A physician loan, you don't have to use it just as a graduating med student. You can use it at any point in your career. And also, it's not a one-shot deal. So you can use it to buy a home going into residency. You're also able to use it after residency to buy the next property. And again, the reason I'm talking so much about a physician loan is not because I'm trying to pitch that product, but the reality is that the majority of graduating medical school students need a physician loan in order to qualify. And if you are the typical graduating med student and you try and use a different loan, then you're going to run into issues. So here's an example. This is an email received April of 2020. Again, I'm crossing out the personal info. My name is X. I'm in the process of closing on a house with my fiance. So they're both fourth-year med students. In this case, they said, are their mortgages through Johnson Financial? That's a generic enough name. I figured that's okay to leave that. But Johnson Financial does not have a true physician loan. And so you notice here they say our problem is with our student loan repayments. They are insisting that we show them documentation from our loan servicers with the amount our repayments will be each month. And we can't provide this and need some help. So, but notice they said, oh, we verified this is a physician loan. What they mean is the Johnson Financial person said, oh yeah, this is a physician loan, but now they're running into challenges because my guess is, I don't remember the details here, they probably matched in March. April now, they thought they were qualified, they found a home, and they're planning to close at some point, probably the following month, and now they realize that Johnson Financial is not able to come through for them. So Allison asked a good question here. Do you pick a loan company after you choose a house or vice versa? What's the timeline for choosing both the loan and a house? Allison, great question. It's almost as if you're a plant because we're moving into that in just a couple slides here regarding the timeline. Because I will leave you with that on what to do and when. One other quick example here. I have so many examples of this. Here's somebody who heard me talk. This is when this was New York. They're moving cross country, and they called a certain bank, and that bank did not have a physician loan. They said they needed, number one, a contract that is signed by the university for the residency program, and a statement from the financial aid office on what their monthly payments would be on their student loan debt. Now, first of all, that's not legal proof. And many financial aid offices are these days also not willing to put something in paper on what someone's payments will be because they don't know what you're going to elect to do down the line and what kind of a payment plan you'll qualify for down the line. So what did I do here? This will be in the handouts. I created a cheat sheet where among the first round of questions that you're going to ask of any loan officer is going to be these questions on the left-hand side. So you'll ask about the down payment. You'll ask what kind of proof of student loan is required. Now, we didn't touch it on PMI. PMI is also one of the main differences between a physician loan and another type of loan. So what is PMI? PMI stands for private mortgage insurance, and it is insurance that protects a lender should you default. Well, statistically, a graduating medical school student or a doctor is not likely to default, so PMI is not required. A true physician loan does not have it. Therefore, it's a savings of anywhere from about $80 to $130 a month. So you're going to ask about these pieces or these questions, and something else in the handouts. I don't go through each of these slides right now, but I created a slide for each one of these 4 types of loans. And it's not that any one of those loans is a bad loan. It's just, when is it the wrong loan for your situation? When is the right loan? So you can just see these as I scroll through, but that's going to be there. I mentioned, you saw this slide about, we're kind of a national brand, and I get contacted a lot by companies who want us to recommend them, because as a company, and Heather, we talked about this, as a company, we're not in all 50 states. We do business ourselves in about 17 states. So if you do reach out to us and you end up buying in a state in which we are licensed, then we do that loan. But a program that we set up to help graduating med students, regardless of where they are, is that we will recommend somebody. We have somebody internally who just tracks who the true physician loan providers are, and those guidelines are always changing. So here's an example of an email I received from a lender who wanted us to refer them in a state where we didn't do business, and she said, "Good morning, Tal. I've attached the guidelines for our doctor loan programs. This is a Freddie Mac loan and does require MI or mortgage insurance." So now you guys know right away, they're calling it a doctor loan, but it's not. It's one of those Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loans that has mortgage insurance. But this is what I'm hoping you guys avoid running into, or at least let me put it this way. When you do run into it, you'll know what questions to ask. You'll be able to spot it. What I will say is, if you do reach out to us, if you can go to our website, request a loan officer, and at least through that, it's going to be somebody that has a true physician loan. So Allison, before we get to your question about timeline, one other thing to review with you is, all right, so let's say you want to buy a house, let's say you qualify. How much money does this all take? So what funds do you need to be able to close on this purchase? And there are 3 things to budget. There's the down payment, which can be 0 or as much as you want. I mean, you're not, if you do a physician loan, you're not limited to 0. You can put more money down if you'd like. There are the closing costs. Those are the fees associated with buying a home. And there are escrows. Escrows, it's not a cost or a fee, but it's money that the mortgage company has you put aside to pay for future taxes and insurance. So for most of you, that range will be anywhere from 0 for how much you need to bring to closing, up to, shouldn't be more than $5,000. One of the best tips I can give you, especially if you're talking to a good agent, is that you're going to have the real estate agent either negotiate to have the sellers pay the closing costs on your behalf, or work it into the price of the home. All right, so kind of the final topic here, and let's see, I'm looking at the time, so is what to do and when. So step number 1, you want to see if it's even feasible, if you qualify for a home. Is now, as long as you are a graduating med student with good credit, when it comes to a physician loan, yeah, you will qualify. Now it's just a matter of how much. For the others, again, as long as you have good credit, you should be able to qualify for a conforming loan or an FHA loan, and a down payment will be required on those. But you would start reaching out any time between now and March or match. Some of you will do that early. Some of you will wait until you match. I'm a fan of starting earlier, getting up that learning curve early. You don't have to know where you're going yet. You can still go to the website, request a loan officer, and say what you think the top 2 states are where you might be. Here's an example. Anna went to our website. She put in information, so she knows she's going to be somewhere in Ohio. And then she had a few questions about townhomes, condos. So you can start the discussion like that. You don't have to feel like a deer in the headlights. You don't have to ask any questions. The loan officer will guide you through it. In the handout, I do have some questions here. you'll see some questions that I give you to ask the loan officer, so that will be in there. This is another example. I'm just going to click through this quickly. This is another example of a company on why it's important to ask the right questions. Here's a flyer. It's a well-known bank. They are, if we zoom in on it here, they have something that they call a doctor loan. And notice, though, when you look at the bullet points, it has lender-paid mortgage insurance. They require you, they're going to count your student loans unless you can show proof it is deferred for the next 12 months. Not that it's deferred every 12 months for 12 months at a time, but that for the next 12 months you don't have payment. So I've got so many of those examples. If more of those pop up, I'll skip through those. I think I made the point. But you're going to reach out to a loan officer who has the kind of financing that you need so that you can get pre-qualified, meaning they've gone through your numbers, they know how much you qualify for. Now you're going to select a real estate agent. So the loan officer and the real estate agent are going to be your two professionals who will walk you through this process. They are the two, you need to trust them. A lot of people ask, well, how can I trust them? Aren't they going to be making money on me? Yes, they're going to be making money on you. Every professional in the world makes money on whoever their clients are, so that you don't have to worry about, but you do have to make sure that they're trustworthy, that they do have your best interest in mind. No different than if I'm hiring an attorney, a plumber, a mechanic, a doctor. You know, I don't want a doctor running procedures just to make a few extra bucks, right? So the same rules apply for any professional. There is something called the DRS Agent Network. This is a network of real estate agents across the country who specialize in working with relocating doctors, especially incoming residents. And for any of you who have involvement with AMA, AOA, AMSA, or SOMA, it's a network that is promoted by them. It is one of the member benefits for those. So it's a free service, just another way to find a good agent in the city where you are moving. And I think, again, going back to Allison's question, if you think, you know, there's a high likelihood that you're matching in one of two cities, you can request a real estate agent in both of those cities and start getting up the learning curve on homes in that area. Here's an example of a real estate agent who is a DRS agent. I'm not pitching him. I'm in Atlanta. I happen to know him. But just to give you an example of you know, what you're looking for, because he does things the right way. It's not about using the agent who sells the most in that area or has the best advertising or the biggest billboards, things like that. But I liked his last paragraph on this flyer. I happened to get this in the mail from him as part of his marketing, so I asked him if I could use this. You know, when it comes to picking the right person to help you navigate one of the most stressful decisions of your life, don't forget what matters most. You know, so you want to work with somebody that you trust. You want to work with somebody that's experienced, and you're going to need to talk to them to make sure you feel comfortable with them and that they're not just a slick salesperson. You know, just trying to make a buck on you. By the way, whoops, went the wrong way. By the way, this is the back side of this flyer he sent me. I put this here to show you on the left-hand side. You know, even within Atlanta, these are 3 different neighborhoods where he works. And notice how there are differences from neighborhood to neighborhood on what home values have been doing over the last month. Over the last year. And so a good real estate agent will also have all of these numbers ready to share with you. In the handouts, you'll also have questions to ask a real estate agent. And so, getting back to our timeline, now through March, certainly as soon after match as possible is when you're going to get a loan officer and a real estate agent. And then once you've matched, now you're actually able to start looking at homes. The real estate agent and the loan officer will walk you through these steps. I don't, you know, if Heather gave me a 2 or 3 hour session, I'd go through each of these steps with you tonight. But the point is just to make you aware of what's coming up and what questions to ask the loan officer and the real estate agent. And they'll walk you through getting the house inspected, what you need to do to get your approval finalized. And so most of you will start looking at homes in March and April, possibly in May, and you'll close on the homes in April, May, or June prior to your orientation, prior to your residency starting. So another, this is an ad that I got. Again, who should you trust? This is from a big company, and I don't like to name names, so let's just say it rhymes with city. That's city with an S, all right? So we'll say it rhymes with city, but this kills me. Adjust how you pay, not how you live. Heather, if that's the kind of advice that financial aid advisors or any financial professionals were to give their students or anybody, that would be a real crime, right? Adjust how you pay, not how you live. No, you're supposed to adjust how you live. I know when you guys match and you start looking at homes, you're going to like the $450,000 home, but that doesn't matter. You're going to adjust and live in the $250,000 home and not find some way to get yourself into that $450,000 home. So I have a problem with this, with a lot of how some of the corporate entities work and some of the individual loan officers there. Here's another example of a physician loan. Somebody who matched in Arizona, and they're looking for a lender. So in this case, notice somebody put them, I think this was their real estate agent, connected them with a loan officer who needed a signed contract, which they couldn't get until the start of residency. So again, this proves the point. And then here's an example of why it makes sense to work with the right loan officer and the right agent. Here's the case where an agent, a real estate agent who wasn't familiar with working with doctors, wasn't familiar with a physician loan, put them in touch with their buddy loan officer. And notice, here's the information where they call it, this was from their flyer, the medical student shared this with me, they call it a physician loan. But now look, for fourth bullet point, lender paid mortgage insurance. If it has mortgage insurance, guys, it is not a true physician loan. Also, now that's not going to prevent you from getting financing, but that's an extra $80 to $130 a month that you shouldn't be paying. And then the fifth bullet point, any student loans deferred greater than 12 months from closing can be excluded for qualifying. Now, Heather will be sharing this with you guys, that once you graduate, your student loans are deferred for, or not deferred even, but whatever program you're in, whether it's a deferment, forbearance, or whatever payment plan you're on, it only is for 12 months at a time. And you reapply and it gets renewed for 12 months at a time. So again, not a true physician loan. So what I hope you learned from this is, forget the numbers, forget what the professionals say and people trying to talk you into buying a home or saying it's an investment. Keep this Venn diagram in mind. Find out what you qualify for. See if that fits in with your budget. See if that fits in with the local home prices. And by the way, to go through this step, yes, you reach out, you request a loan officer, you request a real estate agent. You do need to put some time into it. It doesn't cost you anything to go through that process. Anyone, by the way, who charges you something up front for this, red flag, run in the other direction. But you are going to spend an hour, several hours researching this, talking to a trusted professional to see if it makes sense. So what I'm hoping here as I wrap up, this might have been the old mortgage you, right? Hopefully that deer in the headlights is gone. You feel a little bit more comfortable. This is now the new mortgage you. You're not rocking it just with medicine and sciences, and I think we have, is it speech pathology and all the other professions there. It's, you feel at least a little bit wiser now with this. The handouts will have some of these sites that I use for some of the information and some good reference material. If I'm putting my personal email address here, if any of you have any questions at any point in time, in the coming months, the summer, next few years, doesn't matter. I'm going to be around. You're welcome to reach out to me with any questions you have. If you do want to start talking to a loan officer, you can go to PhysicianLoans.com. That's one resource, and obviously that's my company, but we will either help you out with one of our loan officers, and the nice thing about the service is that if you are moving to a state where we do not operate, we make the warm handoff to help you talk to a loan officer who has a true physician loan. Again, we don't charge for that. That's not something, that's a service we do, and what we arranged for the national associations such as AMA and AOA in order to make sure that no matter what, we're able to provide you at least with some sort of guidance. So with that, we're a few minutes beyond, but hopefully that's okay. And Heather, like I said, I will stick around and answer any additional questions that come up. I see a few.
Thank you so much. Real quick, Tal, I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to do this workshop. And also, you guys, I mean, he gives his email, and I can promise you that our students do reach out to him, as do many students all across the country. But he's a great resource for you if you have questions, or some of this was still, you still feel a little deer in the headlights, like after this is the first time you've heard a lot of this. And so feel free to reach out to him with questions. You can also contact me. I was just going to say, I know we just have 30 or so people left, but I did the random generator for the wireless chargers. So congratulations, Michael, Annie, Apple, Nada, Riley, and Hannah. So I'll be in touch with you guys. You guys won one of our wireless chargers, so thanks for participating. And if you have any questions, you've got Tal at your disposal, so reach out right now.
Well, thank you, Heather. And I see, Aaron typed in a question. What are some of the benefits or drawbacks of paying a down payment on a house versus no down payment? So great question, Aaron. It's a matter of borrowing more versus borrowing less. So the drawback, if we want to call it a drawback, of buying a home with no money down, or let's say 5% down versus 10% down, but you put less money down, you're borrowing more, right? So you're paying interest on a higher loan amount. Now the benefit is that is less cash out of pocket that you have to come up with at closing. Most graduating professionals aren't really kind of, awash in cash at the moment. You're starting out, so the less money that you have to come up with, the better. So if you have enough cash to buy a home for cash and not borrow, wonderful. That's the number one option, but we're not there yet. And so you need to borrow, and now you're weighing, and this is where you can go through scenarios with the loan officer. What would my monthly payment be with no money down versus what's my monthly payment with 5% down? And now you're able to make the decision, an informed decision on, is it worth it to you to put 5% down, or would you rather keep that cash on hand just to have a cushion, or maybe pay off some other debt? But at least after going through that exercise, you'll have a better idea of what works for you. All right, so Kylie asks, do any loans exist? Oh, my screen is moving as you guys are typing in. All right, do any loans exist for first-year medical school students, or are the loans solely for graduating medical students? Great question, Kylie. The answer is there is, and this is across the board, medical school student or otherwise. If you want to get approved for any kind of loan whatsoever, a mortgage loan, you do have to have an income. So as a student, you don't have income as a first-year student, therefore you can't qualify for a mortgage. Now you might say, well, I'm getting student loans and I would be paying my rent out of those student loans. Can't I just pay my mortgage out of the student loans? No, you're not allowed to borrow money in order to qualify to borrow more money, right? So you're not paying off debt with other debt. In the lending world, that's not allowed. So that's why the mortgage programs of physician loans starts for a graduating medical school student as opposed to first, second, or third year. And for the other professions we have, again, as a graduating student, then you can look at the conforming or FHA loan. Now, if you are a student, but also working as a student and you have a job, not part-time work that you have here and there, but a set job with regular pay, then that would qualify. Let's see here. Oh, so, all right, so we covered Allison's question of, do you pick a loan company after you choose a house or vice versa? So yeah, so you're gonna start with the loan officer, first of all, to make sure that you qualify. Doesn't make sense to waste a real estate agent's time, waste your own time, and start looking at homes if you don't qualify, or more likely scenarios if you don't qualify for the amount that you want or need for that property. So you start with the loan officer, get pre-qualified, then you're going to talk to a real estate agent. Allison asks, what are the interest rates like on a physician loan versus conforming versus FHA? Excellent question. Right now, for any of you tracking the market, rates are, they're fantastic across the board. Anything you look at, they are good rates. Most likely anything you look at, you're going to be in the 3s, maybe even just under 3, depending, but you know, don't be upset if that's not the case. You're probably going to be somewhere in the 3s. An FHA loan, I don't know if I mentioned it, is more expensive than a conforming loan or a physician loan, but not because of the interest rates. The interest rate on an FHA loan is fine, but an FHA loan, as I mentioned, is for those with either lower credit scores or not as strong of a file for whatever reason. So it's a higher risk group, and therefore also more defaults, and therefore their mortgage insurance is more expensive. So that's the challenge with FHA, the higher mortgage insurance. Conforming loans will have mortgage insurance unless you put 20% down. A physician loan has no mortgage insurance. There are cases where the interest rate on a physician loan is slightly higher than a conforming loan. However, it's still a cheaper loan because there's no mortgage insurance. So I hope, Allison, if you need a follow-up question to that or something wasn't clear, you know, just let me know, type that in. Yeah, so in the 3s, let's see here. Riley asks, to follow up on that question, as an MD, PhD student who does have some income, do we qualify for a physician loan as students? And if not, the next best thing, a conforming loan. Yeah, so if you are an MD, PhD student still, and you're not going into your residency yet, or if you're not doing residency, but whether it's research or something like that, then you would not be able to do a physician loan. You're looking at doing a conforming loan or an FHA loan. So you would share your scenario with the loan officer and see, given your situation, could you qualify for a conforming loan? Ideally, that's number one choice. If not, what about FHA loan? But yeah, conforming loan would be the next best thing. Madeline, looks like Madeline has left, but asked a question. I'll share it with you, of how do you get the seller to pay your closing costs? That's up to your agent to do. A good agent is a good negotiator and a good deal structurer, if I can say it that way. So they're going to know how to do that and how to set up the contract that way. Now, if you're buying into a very hot market, the sellers are going to be less likely to want to negotiate by paying your closing costs for you. However, your real estate agent, if you tell them, look, I'd prefer as little cash out of pocket as possible, then they'll be able to structure it so maybe you pay a little bit more for the house and you work the closing costs into the price of this house. Again, pro con, it means you're borrowing a little bit more, so you are paying more interest. However, it's really negligible on the month-to-month payment on a mortgage because these are amortized over a 30-year period. So again, pro con to each side. Andrew asked, what effect, if any, does refinancing student loans on your ability to qualify for a loan or the amount you qualify for? All right, excellent. Also, because that's a very real-life question. So if you if you're still, let's say, with your, if you have federal loans, let's say, and you're able, you're not making payments on them yet, or you're on an IBR payment, your income-based repayment, then that lower payment is what's used. If you refinance for whatever reason it made sense for you to refinance, it doesn't have a negative impact. It just means whatever your new payment is, that's what's used in calculating your debt ratio. So as long as you're refinancing and to lock something in and your payment is the same or less than what it would have shown before you refinanced, then it's not going to negatively impact your mortgage. Some of you, maybe you're fortunate you have parental assistance or a working spouse and you refinance and into a shorter term loan so that you can knock out your student loans quicker. So that's great, but it will impact how much you qualify in a mortgage because now that'll be a higher student loan debt that gets plugged into that debt ratio calculation. So thank you for that question, Andrew. It looks like I've addressed all the questions that were typed in. If there are any more questions,